button. Okay, you're good to go.
Hi, my name is Phaedra Tillery Boughton, and welcome. We are here with Deborah Slater Dance and her winner 2023 residency cohorts. We are going to talk with them live today about what they're working on and what's to come. We want to welcome, first of all, the wonderful Deborah Slater. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome. We're so glad to have you here and having a conversation with your selected cohorts. I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves. We'll start with you.
Me?
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alyssa Mitchell, and I am a Bay Area-based choreographer, and I've lived in San Francisco basically my whole life since I was 1 year old. I've been creating and producing work for my company and projects here since 2016. And I currently have a creative partnership with the Contemporary Jewish Museum of San Francisco, where I'll be premiering a new hour-length work during the first 2 weekends of August. And for this residency at Studio 210, I'm developing a new section that will be part of my August shows. And I
frozen.
dive in. I'm frozen. Oh, I can dive into more of what that will be about as we go through this fun exchange.
Thank you, Alyssa. And we'll move on to you. Are you frozen? Are you there? Mussolini?
Hi.
Hi. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Mosleen Park Harrison. You can call me Mossy, and I am a bi-coastal dance maker.
Hi, my name's Anthony Pucci. I go by Anthony, and I'm a bit nomadic at the moment, so also kind of here and there dancing in many places, but in San Francisco for a few months and loving it.
Awesome. What are you currently working on?
So we're making a duet. It's entitled Fool You. And through the course of this duet, we're exploring themes of truth, ignorance, and entropy through the lens of the Cassandra complex, which is a psychological complex that is based on the ancient Greek myth of the seer Cassandra. Anything else?
No, I think that's good.
Cool.
Well, Deborah has quite a few questions for both of you. I'm going to go ahead and let her take it away.
I'm just processing that last piece of information, which I hadn't heard before about Cassandra. That's interesting.
Indeed.
And Alyssa, do you want to say a little bit about what your focus is?
Yes. So the shows in August are based on friendships, relationships, and what it means to be an artist and our struggles in the journey. And for this particular section that I'm creating for the Studio 210 residency, I've researched a philosopher, Martin Buber, who talks of, it's actually the 100th anniversary of his book, I and Thou. And his book dives into 3 types of relationships and friendships, and specifically I, it, I, you, and I, thou. And I, it is kind of like it's not a friendship. It's where one person will use the other person, right? Or it's kind of like a person who wants to have a monologue, right? They're just talking the whole time, not really listening to anyone else. And then you is the second type, which is kind of more business-like, where you acknowledge the other person's there, but you never really want to connect with them on a deeper level. And then thou is that rare, genuine, could be friendship, any type of relationship where you really feel like you both understand each other. And so, yeah, this this section has duets, and then I'm working with 4 dancers. So the first 2 sections are duets, and then the second 2 sections have all 4 dancers in them. And then I'm also working, there will be 2 live musicians in this as well. And I'm collaborating with a Bay Area muralist who's designing 6 panels that the dancers will be wheeling around. So that's a little about it.
Awesome. Great. It's very interesting to me, just in hearing about them, thinking about how relevant it is to the times that we're in, those subjects. Cassandra, we could use her a little warning on her end, although I think we have the warnings. The question is whether she could make anything happen. And then all of us as human beings interacting with each other, which is also questionable right now. I'm curious for you guys whether you found it useful being in the studio. Has it been helpful to your own working process to have this time? And what is it about this particular kind of focus that's useful to you?
Yeah. This is actually something I said to Anthony our very first day when we were in the studio, that it's such a special thing to create your end product in the space that you're going to be performing it in, because I'm really of the mindset that everything is site specific, whether or not you're doing it outside or for film or for a proscenium space. And I think especially this space that's so intimate and also has a lot of technical capabilities that are really different than some proscenium spaces, has opened up a lot of possibilities and pathways of relating to each other, and also relating to the space as kind of like a third character in duet. So I think personally, for sure, it has impacted the way that I'm approaching the movement and thinking about the different images that we can create in relationship to Studio 210.
Interesting. Yeah. Alyssa?
Yeah, I absolutely love this space in terms of I feel like whenever I walk in there, I have just so many new creative ideas. And that's also what a lot of my dancers have said. The 4 of them, they had never been in this space before. And what I also love is going up the stairs and getting a whole bird's eye view of the space. And I feel like it's also interesting to open and close the curtain, because there's a mirror there, and I'm shifting where the front is also. And so I feel like it's rare because there's so many different perspectives and places to see what you're creating, which has really opened my eyes to the whole process. So.
Well, I do want to say about the space that I've had that space since 1980, and a huge amount of work has been made in that little room. So I think of it as one of those caves that has the growing blue cheese stuff on the walls, and it's just there, and you walk in and you breathe the creative energy of the room, and that it's a really great place to take a nap and wake up and have ideas. And I've spent plenty of time in that room sleeping on the floor. But then, when the sun comes in the morning, you lie down in that little square, and then it moves and you chase it around, and then you do something. But that I'm really glad to hear that it feels that way, because I don't know if I gave you that part of the story. It's something that I don't know a lot of spaces that feel the way that room does. I mean, it has been a cared for place for a long time. There's a lot of respect that goes into keeping it pretty clean. And I just think of all the places I've been that are sort of not in that shape, and that you have to spend a lot of time either protecting yourself to move in it, or washing down after you've gotten off the floor, or things like that. It's very special that way. And the fact that it's now a theater too gives you that option to move around, and people have done every imaginable version of stuff in there, including aerial work, which is kind of amazing because it's going to be dead center, you're hitting the wall. But yeah, no, I'm very, very happy to hear that. And then I guess another question is for each of you, do you have a sense of what you want your audience to come away with? Have you thought about sort of what do you even know at this point is a question, I guess, too.
For me, I think I think this particular section has allowed me to think about, and my dancers and collaborators to think about past friendships and relationships and how they fit into each type. And I feel like it would be, I think it's important for the audience to reflect themselves. And what has really helped, as far as I haven't thought as much about the audience as the collaborators I'm working with, but Deborah gave me the idea that has really helped a lot, which is that we all write about, if it's an it's day, we write about kind of an experience or how we felt, or, how it felt to be, have that kind of interaction. And so I think I really want the audience to reflect on their own experiences and not just what they're seeing.
Yeah. I think we talked about that a little bit, the score that you have and whether you decide what the conclusions are ahead of time. As long as you know what you want for yourself. And then people have different opinions about what the audience should or should not be getting.
Yeah.
What about you guys, Masi and Anthony?
Yeah, I'm curious what the audience will feel. It's always like a surprise when I talk to people after a show, especially when I've choreographed. I'm like, oh, it's super clear what I'm getting across, and then like someone's like, oh, I felt this, I saw this, and it's like nothing like what I imagined they would get from it. So I kind of love that surprise of kind of building a scaffolding for people, and then they're going to bring their meaning and their life to it. And I think the scaffolding that we're building is unique to anything that I've done before, in terms of its like repetition and images that kind of surface, appear, and the way I think the audience will recognize things, being repeated or changed. I think it'll be interesting how people interpret that, I guess.
It's interesting to me because with the two of you, you have very different approaches. And I was wondering if you feel like you've moved closer together in the way you talk about things, or are you still bringing the two sides of the conversation? I mean, Alyssa has hers broken into these questions that Martin Buber gave her to think about. So that's one kind of collaboration. This is a very different one. And I was really interested when I met you both initially in conversation about how you talked about what you did. So I wondered if it was affecting how you were moving together now. Has it changed?
I think we're quite symbiotic in the studio, actually. I think it's more about the way that we describe dance and what we're imagining, because but I also think you're totally correct, Deborah, that we do approach things really differently. And that's what has been really exciting about coming together in this space, because I approached Anthony and I asked him if he wanted to explore this concept of the Cassandra complex. And I had done a lot of research about it, et cetera, et cetera. But also I came into that knowing that I really, really wanted this to be a collaboration, and I wanted to have Anthony both challenge and add to and contribute to his interpretation of this idea. And I think through the course of us creating this together, now that I kind of like look at the scaffolding that we've made, I can definitely see that there are a lot of elements that I hadn't envisioned when I first thought about this duet. But also I feel that the sensation, like the sensation of the duet from beginning to end is what I was thinking about, if that makes any sense. So when you ask the question about what should the audience take away from it, when I go into making a piece, I know how it should feel, but I don't know the elements that are leading up to that. And I think Anthony's approach has made me realize that there are different ways of getting to that end result and that end goal that are really exciting.
And I feel a little bit like with Alyssa, the question was, if you've got these three very intellectually examined ideas about intimate relationships or relationships in general, how do you want it to live just in the intellect, or do you want it to go more deeply into what's behind it? So I'm very interested to hear that the writing exercises are working, because to me that gets very personal. That brings it down into the person's real life that they then bring back out in their movement.
Yeah, and I think it's been helpful after writing to talk as a group with the dancers I'm working with, the collaborators, to think about, like, what does this mean? Does this example relate to this type of relationship? And then we've been able to come up with different themes and really talk about how being in each type of relationship feels, and kind of reflect on our own experiences, and then also kind of while hearing what other people have to say, find ways to relate to each other, to think about that as well. So
yeah, I was wondering, you guys haven't talked to each other yet about what you're doing, have you?
No, not yet.
So I'm talking to you weekly, and looking at videos and going, they're both dealing with partnering. They're both dealing with the dilemma of how you express something in the partnering. What has to be there, what doesn't have to be there. How do you do this? I know Anthony was bringing in props, the idea of props. That was a whole thing. I just have to say that it's interesting to me listening to you talk about this now and going, Cassandra did not come up much in our conversations. I mean, it's in the way back there, but it was, there's comedy and things that you guys were talking about that I thought, oh, this is taking a turn to the funny. And I don't know whether it will stay there, but it was interesting to hear you talking about that. But I kept thinking the work has to do with bodies interacting. And I kind of was wishing you could watch each other's rehearsals. So you could go, oh yeah, I know that, but we had that problem. Or, oh, look how they solved that. Oh, that's interesting. That might address this issue we have over here, and vice versa. And are you bringing in any props? Did you guys decide to have props?
Good to see a whole new dance. It's a whole dance.
It's like, I think this past week and a half since we talked last, the props have really been like animating us into different spaces and in creating a lot of really interesting different textures. That's I don't know if it goes all the way to like funny, like laugh out loud, but definitely kind of like whimsical, nonsensical, relating to common elements that we all know from our lives in unique ways. That gets us to move in our partnering and kind of the physical problems we were having. But when we have this third thing to kind of anchor us together, I think that's when the creativity is like really flowing for us personally.
And it's also helped me relate kind of back to this Cassandra idea, because that was something that I entered this duet with, and then I feel that we strayed really far away from that because it didn't really serve us in our exploration of getting to know each other as dancers. And now with the props, I found that I've been able to kind of re-relate to that idea, because we're using the props, at least in the beginning, almost as these objects that we can't control. So they're everyday objects, and suddenly like something turns on, a light bulb turns on, and we can't control it. And we're like using lights and all these different elements that we see every day. So there's this imbalance of control and knowing something versus and being able to predict how that thing will react to us as human beings. But then in kind of like a sci-fi extraterrestrial way, it's doing something too. So dealing with this idea of prediction, control, truth or knowingness, and what that does to us as humans when that goes haywire.
And I want to ask Alyssa, you just had a rehearsal where you brought in the muralist and brought in the musicians and made them do or has that not happened yet?
That's on Sunday. That's this Sunday. Yeah. So
because I was going to say, I want to know what happens when you suddenly have objects in the space with you and what effect it has on everybody and vice versa.
Yeah. So yeah, this Sunday, the muralist I'm collaborating with is gonna come in, start to do some sketches, and she really wants to see a few different sections that we've created in order to inspire her work. And and then both of the musicians, I'm working with a cellist and a guitarist, and they will be coming in as well. And I've been working a lot of like duets, but this Sunday also all 4 of the dancers will be together. So it's going to be everyone together this Sunday. And yeah, I think the main thing I'm thinking about for this particular section, because in this section there are 4 parts to it and 4 different pieces of music. And then as the show as a whole, like where are these murals gonna go and all the transitions between each thing. So which it's gonna be helpful, to start to think about that for this particular section, because there's different people dancing, different different pathways. So
but you're gonna find out what Mossy and Anthony are exploring right now, which is when you introduce that 3rd element and suddenly there's another person in the duet and you're like trying to figure out what to do about it. And is it in your way or is it helping you?
Oh my God.
And are you going to break it or?
Yes. Oh, that's so good to think about. Yeah. That for me too. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many things that happen when you introduce an inanimate object that you animate.
Yeah.
And you think you know what's going to happen, and it doesn't do that. So I want to hear. I kind of wish we could have this conversation again once you've had the chaos of introducing all those people. So you guys can compare notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because it is that intersection, and in some ways you're still intersecting because you're both introducing something besides just the dancing body into the space. And I don't know if my husband just turned something on over there. So one of the questions I guess is for all of you is this a topic that's part of your ongoing research, or is it current in your interest? Does it thread through what you've been exploring? Have you thought about it that way at all yet? Can you even answer that question?
Yeah, I think for me, this ties into other sections of my piece, my bigger piece. One section that I actually choreographed that I'm bringing back into the show, I choreographed it quite a few years ago, was a duet about a very close friendship that kind of disintegrated and will never be the same as it was, even if you're able to kind of confront that person and get be on good terms. And then other sections have to do, with the inner critic as an artist, because I'm researching these two different artists, Martin Buber and R.B. Kitai. But I think that every section kind of weaves together. I also talked to you, Deborah, about one of the sections was like the 7 stages of grief. And that I feel like all of these sections, there's so many parallels to friendship and being an artist. I feel like as artists, we're each on our own journey and we meet people along the way, and they make an impact in our lives. But then it's interesting because everyone is kind of, no one will have the same exact path.
Right.
And that's what makes your journey as an artist so unique to you. So I feel like this is another new section, and Martin Buber was a philosopher. He was an artist. And so I'm just finding all the different parallels between relationships, friendships, and artists and creating. So
Does that seem like it's been a constant for you in your work for quite a while?
yeah, this is something I've been kind of researching since like last year, spring, summer, and I've also exactly a month ago turning 30 and reflecting on my life thus far, and I've just realized, I've just also been reflecting on the friendships I've had, and that some I've met a lot of new people, and haven't made contact with certain people, and it's normal for each season of your life for friendships to kind of get closer or further, and it's something I've been reflecting on recently.
Yeah, in some ways, all of you are a little young to be analyzing your themes, because those emerge over time. But you can, even if you just look at, you've made X amount of work to see if there's a commonality. Do you guys have that, Anthony and Mossy?
Well, I mean, Mossy kind of came in with the idea of the Cassandra complex, which obviously is something you've been relating to for some time and researching pretty intensively. And it was interesting at first. I was kind of like, I don't know if I'm like on that same wavelength, if I'm researching that. And then I started reading, or continued reading, the book I was reading. And just after like having this lens of knowing but denying, like people hearing the truth but not wanting to recognize it, or not being capable of believing it, or the ways that we escape it. I was like, that's exactly what the book I'm reading is about, is like this our ability to like disassociate from what we know, or to pretend like we don't know what we know and continue acting in the same way. So yeah, I think it's been fruitful to have these like conversations of how, because I think we read different types of books. I mean, like you said, we have different approaches, and it's been interesting to like see the collision of these like different paradigms that we're bringing and how they intersect. And it's like my brain is constantly firing, having these conversations with Mossy about, I think what we're both interested in, how it intersects.
Yeah,
I think that there's also, when you're focused on something, it tends to then almost like highlight everything in your life. That whatever that topic is, those things start being everywhere you look, because you're attuned to it, and they might have been there, but suddenly they stick up in a different way because you hear a word and it's a trigger, or you see a gesture, it's a trigger. It's a different process.
yeah. For me, I knew that I wanted to, I'm really interested in mythology, but more how mythology impacts our understanding of modern psychological types, I guess, to say the least. And so as Anthony said, I was like really stuck in like the research part of this and didn't really know how it could be embodied. And I think there was a nice moment of, yeah, all of our thoughts kind of getting put into the pot. And then the things that were sort of gravitating towards each other in similarity or in juxtaposition coming out of that and lending themselves to almost like more of an abstraction of this idea, which I think is a thing to put in the body, first of all, and then I think we were able to get a little bit more specific, and by specific, I mean more theatrical, more opinionated about what we're doing, what we're saying, etc. And for me, this is research for a immersive theater show that I'm making next year. So it's just a really, it's a thing on it, it's its own thing on its own, but it also contributes to the future. But I'm sure we all know that every single thing that we make somehow shows up again in the next thing.
And I was just thinking, I wondered if there would be any way to like switch parts so that you guys are doing the same movement, but every intention or the text or the music, or that you reverse it, so that just because you're walking the same tightrope, you're walking the same process, and the conversations, even as you talk about it, I go, well, that sounds like that. That's an echo of that. But where you're going is completely different. I mean, it's really interesting to me how close your explorations are. And
Alyssa and us? Or, okay, yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
No, I have all my work, but I mean, you know, no. It is really interesting to me because often there are, maybe the movement process is similar, or people's work is completely different, and the way they will resonate against each other in the residency program is really fascinating because they're so different. But I feel like you guys, there is something about dealing with the body in duet form to begin with, introducing objects, and then whether or not there is a personal underpinning to it. I mean, by having the dancers write, they don't have to tell you the stories, but they are grounded in some way. And you guys are having to figure out how to speak to each other and make it real for you. So it's getting grounded in some way. And even just in listening to you talk about it, the way the two of you talk is different than it was when I first met you, and how those conversations went. So it's fascinating. Yeah. It's great. No, it's really wonderful. And I'm just, do we have any questions we need to deal with out there? Okay, so.
There aren't any questions, but if you do have any questions that you would like to ask either one of our artists or Miss Slater, go ahead and place those in the chat so we can share and ask.
And I also want to invite you too, Fader, because you come from a theater background. Is there anything that you want to ask them? Does this strike? You haven't heard all the things I've heard, so you don't have as much information as I do.
And this is actually really, there's been very inspiring conversation, and how you've done a lot of research in order to like start these pieces. But what inspired you to research those things? Like what brought you to those topics is something that I'm interested in knowing.
Well, for me, actually, my mom is a psychiatrist, and she was looking at she's sent me a lot of different philosophical articles, and this was like probably last year in April, and sometimes, you know, I don't read, I'm like, okay, this is too dense for me, I can't process this. But I found Martin Buber's ideas, and, you know, I am by means not an expert on Martin Buber, but I found a lot of these ideas to really resonate with me, and to make me reflect on that. So anyways, thank you, Mom, for sending me that. And then I also, the other artist who I've researched for other sections of the show that will happen in August, is R.B. Kitai, who I found through looking at a few Jewish painters, because he was a painter, and wound up creating a piece this past summer based on his life, and based on the end of his life, where he had a bunch of his paintings at the Tate Gallery in London, and a bunch of critics attacked him because they didn't like that he wrote a lot of paragraphs about each piece. They thought that was too narcissistic. And so then they slandered him, and then 2 weeks later his wife died, and there was a whole and he felt like he then for the rest of his life was this inner critic, and there are these outer critics, and I wound up creating a piece called Inner Critic. And I feel like as artists, we all can, put ourselves down, and we are always our deepest critic. So
Yep.
yeah, so those are the two people I researched, and that was kind of through my own, and then Martin Buber was through my mom. So you never know what you'll come across.
Right.
Yeah.
There you guys.
I forgot the question, sorry.
What made you come up with the concepts? Like what inspired the
Have
concept?
you done a lot of research? And no, Phaedra, ask it. You said it better than I am. That's for sure.
Right. The concept. I kind of hate to say this, but I think I was, at least for the Cassandra thing, I was inspired by the pandemic. This global experience that we're having, and the fact that there is still a huge group of people that say it's not happening. And just, just that, as simple as that, something's happening, we see it, and other people say no. And yeah, and so I think I was kind of searching for a story that, gives some, maybe a little bit more of a romantic edge to that conundrum that is the human experience of maybe sensing or feeling that something is true, but then making the choice to ignore it, or making the choice to follow that truth, and how reality is a very overwhelming thing that humans actually can't grasp. And we use all sort of mechanisms to help ourselves still navigate through that. So for me, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I feel like I've been interested in this idea of truth and how we relate to it, like how this idea of like a primary source or secondary source, like the internet is a primary source. There's often videos of things that happen, but people still won't agree on what they saw, even though there's a video.
Yep.
Like so just this this ability that is psychological. And I'm reading a psychology text right now, and it's interesting because a lot of the things that they're talking about are related to Greek mythology. They'll use mythology as a way to like name something. So I think there is this weaving of everyday psychology and these huge stories that we tell that demonstrate something that lives in all of us.
Thank
So
you. Go ahead. Sorry, I'm sorry.
No, did that answer your question? Did you have anything?
It did. Both of them. Thank you.
Great.
I have another question. And has Deborah's mentorship changed what you thought you'd make?
I definitely have approached the process so far differently than I usually do. And as we were talking about the writing, and I think not just me writing, but having each artist who I'm working with write and really reflect on their own experiences, I think allows them to really put themselves in the character that they're portraying. And it's, I'm used to, okay, I don't have a lot of time, let me just teach a bunch of choreography, and you go there and you go there. And it's great to slow down, be in the space. But it's not that it's also not that it's slowing down, because it's allowing people to really dive deeper and know and really feel what they're trying to express as we are putting parts together. So I think that this is something that I want to, like, this writing exercise is something that I want to take with me even after the residency, because it really makes a difference in terms of everyone involved, and everyone really understands more what we are trying to express as a team. Yeah.
And Anthony and Mossy?
I feel like for me, it's hard to say definitively, but I wanted to embark in this experience because I hoped that Deborah would greatly impact the way that we're approaching this work. And I knew that that was going to happen. And I guess then it's a yes. Yes, that definitely.
You're just in it. You're just in it and letting it happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to do this residency because this is the kind of critical analysis of dance that I am interested in.
Awesome.
Make art that I'm interested in.
Yeah, and even after our conversations with Deborah, because we have, one a week where we talk for like an hour or so, and even after those conversations, Mossy and I will stay where we are, and we're like, okay, like we're kind of like another hour of us just like going off with ideas, because I don't know, Deborah's is amazing. We'll be like, oh yeah, we're thinking about exploring text, and then Deborah will go, oh okay, well I did this one piece where we did this text, or we did this one thing where we did this. We'll throw out like 50 exercises, and if you're gonna do that, offer 20 hours of rehearsal space to get through all the exercises.
That's what happens when you've had a dance studio since 1980. You got all the knowledge,
Yeah,
That's
even
awesome.
just that.
Take it, please.
Yeah, of ideas of like how this thing we have an inkling about, the many ways you offer us to kind of start etching away at whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
And then we kind of start owning that process and following our own curiosities in the studios. It's wonderful because it kind of gives me more confidence to just like take the first step and see where it takes us. So yeah, I'd say so.
And it's to me, it's a kind of dialogue. I mean, with both of you, the two groups, I'm having dialogues because I just feel like I get to be outside of it. So I can say, here's 17 options, because I've been around so long, I got a lot of options. I'm probably forgetting other ones that would be useful too, but this is the group I remember today, and this is what you've triggered in me. But I have to say that this is a mutual experience, because what you guys talk about is really compelling. And then I think, oh, now that's really interesting how they're looking at the problem, how each of you is digesting the information, because each week I get to see what you've done with whatever the questions are that you're using. And then sometimes it will either give rise to other questions or just like, oh, that's a really interesting conclusion that you drew. How whatever comes up might not have been how I saw it at all, which is the best part of all of this, is to be able to, I'm not responsible. I'm just going to say all these ideas and you can take what you need. And then I get to sit and go, good job.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate both of you have been really rigorous in working in the working process. And I think it's one of the things that I love the most about this residency is people seem to take it really seriously. And I'm thrilled that you guys are doing just that, that there really is like, well, I don't know how to do this part. So here's some things we can try that might be terrifying. Let's do them. And I really appreciate the fact that's, I mean, I'm going to say that's some of the reason you came into this, is to be forced to do things you might not have considered before. I think that's one of the great things about having someone else watch and ask questions. And then the question is, that's a whole nother conversation about the bed that you are living in that moment. Is it a comfortable one, or is somebody beating you over the head with stuff, or how does it work? And I'm very happy that you feel like the things that have been offered are useful, because you really never know. And there's going to be like, I'll give you 20 options and you'll go, 17 of those really suck and have no bearing, but those 3 are really good. and one of them might work. And that's enough for me, if you get anything out of it. And and now it's going to get really fun because things are starting to flower. And I kind of wish we could have another conversation later so I could say, so was this anything like what you expected? And it's too soon to ask that because they're not done yet. But
Maybe
that
we
is
should start
something.
having a live after
Yeah.
it was over.
Yeah, I mean, I may make you guys tell me that anyway, because I am curious to know if where you end up is at all where you expected to end up. Because often the path, you can't just follow the path you've laid out. You've got to, if there's a left turn and it's really compelling, you have to take it. That's the choice as an artist, is to be paying attention and not limit yourself because you already wrote down what it was supposed to be. So I think both groups are really just going along to see where you are and digesting it as you go. You're doing fantastic stuff. And I think that, I mean, unless you have anything else you want to say, that is a wrap pretty much.
Nope, there are no other questions. We want to thank everyone who logged on and listened to our conversation today with Miss Deborah Slater, Anthony, and Marcy, and Alyssa. We thank you all for being here this evening. If you want to come and see the show, log on to deborahslater.org, where you can find more information about tickets and details about the upcoming cohort. Thank you again for joining us. You guys have a good evening.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Phaedra. Fabulous job. Thank you, guys. I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
Bye.